This is the great Dean Obeidallah, my colleague here on Sirius XM Progress. He's on from 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And his newsletter, his Substack newsletter is called The Dean's Report. Dean Obeidallah, obeidallah.substack.com. So, Dean, I have a question for you. One of the somebody called a couple of days ago and said, if Trump is convicted at the end of his trial, is it
Can we just stop and then can we just enjoy that for a moment? That idea that Trump is convicted, guilty of all counts.
For sure.
You.
Yeah.
Thank you to George. Okay, let's all enjoy that. Okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
Yeah. Again. By the way, my apologies. We almost never have guests at the bottom of the hour. They're almost always at the top.
Oh, no problem.
So, in fact, Sean missed it too. If he's convicted, does that mean that he gets immediately handcuffed and taken off to jail, or is there? I mean, how does this work under New York law? And does the jury decide his penalty, or does the judge?
No, the judge will in this case. That's only like death penalty cases where you see the jury actually making a determination. In this case, no. If Donald Trump is found guilty, which he should be, and if he's convicted of numerous felonies, the judge will set a date for sentencing in the future. In between that day of conviction and the sentencing, there's reports written by the Department, by not DOJ, but in this case, the New York prosecutor's office recommending what they want. Trump's lawyers will file their briefs arguing, give him, he should get nothing, you should pay for his golf, whatever ridiculous thing. And then the judge will call all the parties in for a certain day and sentence. And even then, with the sentencing date, often it's not to report to prison that day. It could be in the future. So they could say, okay, come back on July 1st. You're sentenced to 2 months in jail or a year in jail, whatever it is. You don't start your sentence for another 2 months or 3 months. That's kind of typical. Trump's lawyers can argue for an appeal and don't impose any sentence until the appeal runs out, like Steve Bannon has done effectively in his criminal contempt case, where he was sentenced to prison, but the judge allowed them to be out of prison awaiting the appeal being resolved. So it's less likely with a shorter prison sentence. It's more likely the court will allow the appeal to take place and play out before they actually have to go in. In a longer prison sentence, it's unlikely. They go, no, you go in, the appeal will continue while you're inside.
Right. That would probably be for things like violent crimes where it's assumed that you represent a threat to society. Although I think you could build a strong case that Donald Trump does represent a threat to society. It's just not one that he's
very much so.
Yeah. So you published two brilliant pieces over at the Dean's Report over on Substack this week, and I'd like to ping both of them with you, discuss both of them. The first was titled "Trump is planning his next January 6th attack right in front of our eyes." Explain.
Well, Donald Trump is telling everyone, listen to his words. Tom, I don't know what more to say to our fellow Americans. Everyone listening to your show and my show and all of our shows, they are paying attention. Our fellow Americans are not. Donald Trump tells you what he's going to do and then does it. So he said in two interviews, the Time magazine interview that was released last week and an interview he did with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel in Wisconsin, that he's not going to accept the election results unless he wins. He said, I'll accept it if it's honest. And he said, if it's not, then we're going to have to fight for our country. So he's starting to use the fight words again. And he was pressed by the Time magazine reporter about, well, you denounce any type of political violence? And he goes, well, it's an honest election, but if it's not, we'll have to see how it goes. The guy is telling you and priming his base. And add to that, Tom, Donald Trump's continued celebration of the January 6th terrorists as being patriots and vowing to pardon them. That's to incentivize future crimes on his behalf to help him win the election, because his supporters will know, okay, if he wins again, he's going to pardon us, just like he's promising for the January 6th people. So, Tom, who knows? It's election day, the day after election, and Trump is up in his state, but they're still counting ballots, and he sends his supporters to run in there and stop the count like he wanted to stop it. Well, they know they go in there. If it's a federal crime only, he can pardon them. He will do that. He is planning it. It's right in front of us. Don't look away. This is not a drill. This is a fascist wannabe dictator who's the most dangerous thing on our soil that we've ever dealt with in the modern era.
Are you envisioning this as something, I mean, the Capitol Police have figured out, I don't think there's going to be another attack on the Capitol, but are you envisioning this as more like what happened in 2000 down in Florida, where George W. Bush, his campaign had, flew down all these staffers from Tom DeLay's office and They had the so-called Brooks Brothers riot where they were banging on the windows and saying, "Stop the count."
Exactly. And they tried that in Arizona in 2020. Now, COVID protocols kind of protect them, but they were outside of the venue where the counting was going on. I don't mean the recount, I mean the actual counting. And they were worried for their safety. Trump will send his people, or even if he doesn't directly send them, he will say things like, "Stop the count, and they will jump into gear. He's priming his base. He has radicalized them like an ISIS recruiter, like he did in 2020 with all those lies about the election. And then he brings them to the doorstep of violence. And when he needs them, he asks them what they have to do, and they gladly step over that doorstep of violence to act on his behalf. And his promise of a pardon is the way to encourage people to do that. And we get closer to Election Day, you must be aware of that. Trump should say, of course there'll be no violence. There should be no place for violence whatsoever, especially after January 6th. He won't say it because he wants it again. He's using violence as one of the tools in the arsenal, just like every fascist movement that used violence to acquire and retain political power. It's characteristic trait.
It's intrinsic to fascism, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
And you said like an ISIS recruiter. That's chilling.
That's what he is.
Yeah, exactly. Your second piece, Trump reminds us again how dangerous MAGA is to our nation. Lay this out.
Well, look, it doesn't end. I mean, it had to do, it's intertwined with the first article we touched on. But this was more updating it, where Trump at his event on Saturday was an RNC event. And he's there speaking to the big donors, who gave $40,000 or more to be at Mar-a-Lago. He comes on stage to a song sung by terrorists. That's right, by January 6 terrorists. The J6 choir comes on stage and then talks about pardoning people again. And then he says Biden is like a Gestapo administration. And that's projection from Trump. We know that. We all know the Gestapo was a Nazi secret police. And they were involved, first off, in silencing and executing the political opponents of Hitler once he came to power. Later, they were involved in deporting Jews from around Europe to death camps. That's what the Gestapo did. For Trump to again cite Nazis, which he's channeled their language about the immigrants poisoning the blood of our society, but now Biden being Gestapo, it should make the hair on the back of your neck go up, because we all know Trump is about projection. He's telling you what he is going to do. And there's no defense. No one at that event, Tom, said you shouldn't say Gestapo, or you shouldn't pardon the January 6 terrorists, or you shouldn't walk on stage to a song celebrating the January 6 terrorists. And again, to invoke Hitler. We know, and we've talked about this before, what did Hitler do after his failed 1923 beer hole putsch, his own coup? Later, he celebrated as martyrs those who were killed in trying to get him to power. Right. He would celebrate them and make them heroes to rile up his base to incentivize more conduct.
And he had a song. I mean, the Horst Wessel song. Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. Yeah. It was all about this guy who died, in one of Hitler's riots.
Yep, and exactly. That's the celebration and the sacralizing, as my friend Ruth Ben-Ghiat said on my show last night, who's an expert on authoritarianism. That's what this is. You're making violence righteous. You're making it a sacrament of your movement. We've never seen this, Tom. And I don't know what more to wake up our fellow Americans who are not paying attention to this. This is not a game. This man is, I think MAGA is the greatest threat to us since World War II's Axis powers. But they're more dangerous, MAGA, because they're on the soil with us. They're here.
To what extent do you see MAGA, and Dean, we just have 45 seconds here before we hit a hard break. To what extent do you see MAGA as essentially the reinvention of the America First movement back in the 20s and 30s that was, openly in favor of Hitler and Nazism?
Sure, it is the reincarnation of it.
Or the
We've
Klan.
had, Rachel Maddow's great book, Prequel, goes through all the rise of fascism movements in the U.S. leading up to World War II, our involvement. And, the rallies at Madison Square Garden, summer camps, like Nazi youth summer camps in America, in New Jersey, in New York, in Yorkville, not far from where I live, a big bastion of it. And if it wasn't for World War II or going into it by way of the Japanese bombing us, these people were trying to keep us out of the war because they supported Hitler the same way many in the GOP, not all, to be fair, support Vladimir Putin. And they all love Hungary's Orban. Right. They are telling you what they want America to be. And we need enough of us to listen to inform our friends that this is not a game. This is not normal politics. This is very dangerous.
Yeah, I'm with you. Dean, again, my apologies for for
No problem.
missing that you were
Tom,
at home.
we're buddies. It's fine. I'm happy to be on for any amount of time, whenever day you want me, I'm here. So
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you so much for dropping by. It's always great talking with you. I always learn something from you. Dean, the great Dean Obeidallah, check out his Substack. Dean, just go to Substack and plug in Dean's report, and it'll pop right up. Dean, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, good talking.